Oh, hang on. Yeah, what are we calling this podcast?
Was it over underrated?
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Überschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
Welcome to Over Underrated, a new music podcast for you to love or hate. Fingers crossed it's the former. I'm Babs, and on this podcast, I will be in conversation with my co-host Fran. We wanted to create a podcast for music nerds by music nerds. Fran and I live in different countries, so the episodes are recorded over Zoom. And when we recorded the second episode, we still didn't have the proper mics that we have now. So please bear with us. We promise that the sound quality gets better. Thanks for listening.
Over underrated. Sopra sottovalutato. Sous-évalué. Over underrated. Sous-évalué.
Well, welcome to Over Underrated with Fran and Babs. This is a podcast for music lovers, people with strong opinions who want to talk about bands that have got a bit too much fame and those that we think deserve a little bit more coverage out there.
And today we are doing Athens' finest, R.E.M, as the overrated and underrated, the B-52's.
Absolutely. So Fran has made a playlist with 10 R.E.M songs to try and convince me that they're good. And I have bombarded Fran with 10 B-52 songs to try and convince him that they're more than just a novelty band.
And are we starting with R.E.M or B-52's?
I think as R.E.M are overrated, maybe we should start with the big guns.
Overrated.
So what's your relationship with R.E.M, Fran?
Well, I think like a lot of people of my age, my first R.E.M memory was probably Shiny Happy People, which
Holding hands.
does have both bands we're talking about in the video.
Absolutely. And was famously left off their greatest hits, right?
Yeah, R.E.M hate it, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know if hate it or maybe just bored and tired of it. I guess it is there, like, in the same way as B-52's we're probably going to get to Love Shack. It's their Love Shack. It's their, like, novelty, wedding, dance type hit, which doesn't really match most of their catalogue at all.
But I really like that is an R.E.M song that I like more than a lot of their others, I have to say. So yeah, it's a real shame that they didn't include it. For me, R.E.M are one of those bands that I actually want to like. You know, I have spoken previously about Oasis. If you really want me to see me hate on someone, go there and please don't send me death threats. You know, Michael Stipe seems like an amazing guy, you know, an openly gay frontman back in the 80s and 90s when it wasn't so easy. I really admire him and I admire the band, but I think broadly they're a bit too poppy for me. For some reason, I'm a big pop fan. I'm an unashamed pop fan these days. But when it's poppy rock, I find it very difficult to get my head around. And there's just a lot of poppy R.E.M songs. And on the list that you sent me, Fran, it's a bit more varied. You know, there's like a country song and a more kind of post-punky song. And I enjoyed seeing that variety of them. But there's a lot that I just... Yeah, it's a bit too saccharine. It's a bit too, no, not shiny, happy people, but a bit too shiny for me.
It's interesting because I mean, to a lot of people, R.E.M are the quintessential indie band because obviously they started out very, very lo-fi with Michael Stipe being so shy, people couldn't even hear the lyrics because he didn't have any confidence. And for a long time, people had no idea what he was singing about until later on. And obviously, when they sort of like grew through the 80s and gained popularity, as the band became more confident, so did his voice. And obviously, by the 90s, he was, everyone could understand his lyrics. But yeah, I think they are a band who very much, like The Cure, can have two pop bangers for mainstream radio, and then the rest of the album being not commercial in the slightest. Yeah, and if you look at their big hitters, like that album-wise, Automatic for the People, for example, and is it In Time, I should probably know the name of the album. Out of Time. Apart from like the two big singles, everything else is just them experimenting. Like on Out of Time, they've got the guy from Tribe Called Quest rapping on it. They got Q-Tip, they got B-52's. Like they literally would just try anything. And for like an indie band in the early 90s, that was kind of quite radical. But if you want really non-pop R.E.M, then you should listen to Adventures in Hi-Fi,
Hmm.
because that is not a pop album whatsoever. Got like
Yeah.
Pat Smith on it. It's got it's quite a dark album. There's no singles but became a hit on it whatsoever.
Okay.
And that was after they were like one of the biggest bands in the world. I'm not a massive fan of it, but like the true R.E.M. fans adore it in the same way that Manic Street Pizza fans always have to love the Holy Bible.
Holy Bible. Yeah.
Hardcore R.E.M. fans always say, yeah, it's Adventures in Hi-Fi is the best album, man.
So on the playlist, you started with so the playlist you gave me is in chronological order, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
I thought it's songs from start to the end, which I thought may not be as much on your radar.
Yeah. So I think I knew 2 of the songs on the playlist, and that was it. But the first one is Radio Free Europe, and I honestly would not have guessed it was R.E.M. when I first heard it. It doesn't even sound like Michael Stipe singing, so I was surprised. But yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was fine, but it didn't really kind of blow my mind. But I was pleasantly surprised to see kind of a different direction from R.E.M. at the beginning.
But yeah, Radio Free Europe was their first new wave hit. And then I've got Talk About the Passion. That's quite,
Yeah, that was a bit too poppy. I put that it was.
Is that poppy?
Yeah, I put standard R.E.M. fair, not a fan too poppy. But I did enjoy the mix of French and English because he sings a bit in French.
Is he really? I've never done that. And then you got Don't Go Back to Rockville. It's a country hit randomly.
Yes, so that was, what the fuck was that? I was really surprised. And I read that it was actually originally performed in a punk thrash style. And I was like, this in a punk thrash style, I would have really liked to hear. But in a country style with lyrics like smack, crack, shakalak, I was like, what is going on?
Okay, What's the Figure to Kenneth? You probably know that song, yeah?
Yeah, so I know that song, and it's, again, fine. That's mostly how I feel about R.E.M. But I actually didn't know the story behind it. So Michael Stipe says that the lyrics are about the Generation X phenomenon in contemporary mass media, sung in character as an older critic whose information consists exclusively of media products. Quote. The song's title refers to an incident in New York City in 1986 when 2 then unknown assailants attacked journalist Dan Rather while repeating, Kenneth, what is the frequency? So Dan Rather was like a news anchor sort of thing. So he wasn't anything, I think, to do with music. And yeah, I think it then became kind of a thing in pop culture, right? That people quoted. So that was very interesting. And Stipe said that he wrote it as the protagonist is a guy who's trying to understand what motivates the younger generation. So it feels very, like 90s slacker, he got nowhere song. And yeah, I guess because I wasn't really into the song, I hadn't really paid attention to the lyrics or the background, and I thought that was quite interesting.
See, I think I put it on because it's a bit more, I thought, not punky, it's a bit more, like rocky.
Yeah,
I guess not.
Yeah, I think you're quickly understanding that. Yeah, if it's a bit too poppy, if it's rock and it's a bit too poppy, it's not for me.
Because that album that's from I think that's the lead single from Monster, which was the album after the Behemoth or for the People, and to me, because I was in my early teens when that came out, I was like, oh, this is a bit dangerous. Because I had only heard things like Shine Happy People, Everybody Hurts, Night Swimming, which are all kind of melodic and not at all like rockers. There's no like feedback and distortion. When Monster came out, which I assume was probably influenced by grunge a bit, it's got quite a few like heavier riffs on it. And I was like, oh goodness. This isn't what I'm.
They can do it all.
I think that when I was like, when I was younger, I basically skipped that album because I thought, oh no, this is too hard for me. And then I got back into him like probably in about 1998 after they lost the drummer.
But I think so. With you put Strange Currencies, and you put At My Most Beautiful. The lyrics annoyed me so much. I think as well.
What are the lyrics? I don't think I've ever listened to this. Really.
So the lyrics that I've put, so for Strange Currencies, I've written, whoever Stipe is singing about is a fuckwit because he says, I don't know why you're mean to me when I call on the telephone, and I don't know what you mean to me, but I want to turn you on, turn you up, figure you out, I want to take you on. At My Most Beautiful, he sings, I count your eyelashes secretly. With every one I whisper, I love you.
We've all done
Just-
that. Come on, when haven't you done?
Oh yeah, every man I've been with, I count like eyelashes. You know, that's a given. And I mean, they look at me strangely, but
I'm not sure when he came out being gay. I'm pretty sure he was quite ambivalent through his sexuality for a long time.
so he wasn't out in the 80s.
No, I don't. No, not at all in the 80s.
Okay.
I'm trying to look now, obviously. I think he was one of those people who would always avoid that question.
Mhm.
It's like, what does it matter to you?
Mhm. Yeah.
Here we go. 1994. He did not define himself as gay, straight, or bisexual. The first time he even mentioned his sexuality was he referred to himself as a queer artist in 2001.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I became a bit more, I knew the hits. So in 2001, I would have been 13, 14. And that's around the time that I started getting into Radiohead big time. They were my favorite band. And I know that Michael Stipe said about Radiohead is so good that it scares me. So I think that's when I started to become a bit more aware of kind of Michael Stipe and R.E.M. as bands. And maybe then, like for me, I feel like I've always known that he's queer, but maybe that's not the case. It's just in the time that I've been aware of them that he has been.
But at my most beautiful, yes, it's for the Sacrian, and I just enjoy the piano because I listen to things for the melody, and the piano and the cello I adore in that song. That's why I've always liked it.
Yeah, I mean, fair, you are entitled to, and I mean, it's not that I'm not a romantic. I mean, I'm not a big romantic, and I do like a good love song, but just At My Most Beautiful and Strange Currencies, it's not for me. It's not for my kind of more cynical vibe.
Okay.
But from the same year, and I think the same album, you've put The Great Beyond.
That was not from an album.
Oh, sorry, that was from the Greatest Hits, right?
No, it was from the film about the Man on the Moon.
Man on the Moon. But the only R.E.M. album that it was included on was their Greatest Hits.
Yeah. I think that's one of their better songs.
That's my favorite song. So from the playlist that you provided, actually it was a song that I knew but I'd forgotten about.
Have you seen the film?
I haven't seen the film. Is it good?
Yeah, definitely. It's about Andy Kaufman. He's like the bonkers comedian from the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, and the song Man on the Moon.
Yes.
Was about him. Obviously, I had no idea.
Yes,
until, the film
that
came
song
out.
annoyed me a lot. So Man on the Moon, I really don't like. It's just, to be honest, I think I partly don't like it because it was everywhere. I feel like that song was everywhere when it came out. Whereas The Great Beyond, I don't even remember when I heard it. My dad has the R.E.M. Greatest Hits, so it could have been with him, and he bloody loves Night Swimming and What's the Frequency, Kenneth. My dad is actually quite a pop person, and he really appreciates melody over everything else. And my mum was very into rock, very into prog. So as a family growing up, there were a lot of fights about what to play on the radio. And everything. And my mum passed away 14 years ago, but my dad still has the scars of fighting with her and fighting with me, and there's still stuff that he absolutely refuses to let me play 14 years on because he's just like, no, your mother put that on too much. And I'm like, come on, Dad, like, let me play this Muse album track. So yeah, and he loves ABBA. He really, really, really loves ABBA. I got him the Greatest Hits, but then he did point out to me that Kurt Cobain loved ABBA as well. So he's got a point.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Överschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
The R.E.M. are not a greatest hits band, and I think they are an albums band. I think they have, like the Smiths, I think you cannot justify the Smiths from a best of. You have to listen to the albums. And I think R.E.M. are similar. And I think if you heard the albums as a whole, like Force Matter for the People, you may have a different impression of R.E.M.
I think it's a tricky one because your playlist was a bit of a greatest hits for me, right? And it's, deliberately a slightly more alternative one. What I enjoyed about it was the breadth that it covered of genres that R.E.M. have done, and it did actually make with I loved listening to The Great Beyond again, and actually the last song that you put on it, the Alligator Aviator Autopilot Antimatter, with Peaches on backing vocals, wonderful. That was the one of the few that I was like, oh, I actually do want to go and check out the album. So I think I totally get what you mean of some bands are better with the singles, and it's enough to have the greatest hits. But Blur, for example, I got into Blur through their greatest hits, and I would argue that Blur are also not technically a greatest hits band.
I don't know.
Oh, you disagree?
I think Blur. If I think of my top 20 Blur songs, I'm pretty sure most of those will be singles.
See, 13 for me was a revelation. And 13 is my favorite Blur album. And you do not get the vibe of 13 at all. Tender, Coffee and TV, and No Distance Left to Run.
Yeah.
They're the 3 songs that are on the greatest hits. Swamp Song isn't on there. Trim Trab isn't on there. Caramel isn't on there. And I love those songs so much. But I wouldn't have got to 13 without first starting with the greatest hits. So yeah, and Depeche Mode is another one. They have the 81, 85, and 86, 98. That's another band that I got in through the greatest hits. But yeah, you would argue also they're very much an albums band.
I got into Depeche Mode through Depeche Mode 101.
Ooh, what's that?
One of the finest live albums of all time.
Ooh,
and every single track on 101 sounds better than the studio. So
interesting. That will be homework for me then.
So I'm guessing that on this compilation, you must have really hated Near World Heaven.
Yes.
But did you
No.
notice
I put one of the more tolerable ones, but again, I just don't click.
Do you notice that has different vocals? Because that's the bassist, Mike Mills, is singing.
Mike Mills, yeah.
A lot of that. There you go.
Which, do you know that? Right, there's an Air song called Mike Mills, and I wondered, are they talking about the R.E.M. bassist or the film director in that song? But I think for a long time I thought it was about the bassist, because I think I was aware of the bassist before I was aware of the film director.
Well, I'm using Wikipedia, and it does not say. Sorry, guys. I can get back to you later on, and I'll pop it in.
Mystery. Get in touch if you know why. But anyway, yeah. So Near Wild Heaven, fine, but I'm Gonna DJ was also one of my favorites, and so I'm Gonna DJ, and the inclusion of Alligator, Aviator, Autopilot, Antimatter, mouthful. They made me, I want to ask you, Fran, should I go and listen to later R.E.M. if I like those songs? Is it more of the same?
Basically, after Great Beyond, they had a comeback single, which I should probably try and Google, which I thought was R.E.M. by numbers, and it became like one of their last hits.
Is that Imitation of Life?
Yeah, and to me that's like R.E.M. trying to be R.E.M. just to try and get a pop hit, and I didn't really like it. It seemed too forced. After that final hit, I think they basically said, "Right, we're massive. Let's just do anything we like." So the last 2 albums, but they also knew were going to be the last 2 albums, and they are really not commercial. They are, just like them as a band, just going for it. So I think you would like the last 2 albums because they do not sound like anything from the 90s at all.
Yeah, I will go and listen to them and come back to you on that, because definitely I'm Gonna DJ was one of, I actually put that it was my favorite, but actually on listening to it again, I think The Great Beyond is my favorite from the list that you gave.
See, I think R.E.M. are the America's answer to the Smiths in a way, for me.
America's answer to?
The Smiths.
Oh, the Smiths.
Well, you got Michael Stipe, quite flamboyant, iconic, sort of androgynous front man. They got an amazing guitar player who loves loves the old melodic guitar, very much like Johnny Marr. They're a 4-piece. Michael Stipe was very good lyricist, and it'd be interesting to see if the Smiths had carried on into the 90s. Would they have become the commercial band like R.E.M. did as well? I'm a big fan of R.E.M. I've seen them live a few times. They're amazing live bands. I would not say they're my all-time favorite. I don't own every single R.E.M. album, but I think that you would definitely enjoy proper indie albums before I think it's Warner Brothers. They signed in 1989. I think you'd definitely like their stuff.
Well, I will go and listen and come back to you on a future episode. I used to be very closed-minded when it came to music, and I think I'm in my 30s. I am trying to be far more open-minded on music and other things, and yeah, I think unlike Oasis, which we talked about before, I really don't think my mind can be changed on that. But on R.E.M., I kind of want my mind to be changed. I really do want to like them, but it just doesn't quite click with me, and I don't really know why. I don't think it is just poppiness. Yeah, maybe it's just too melodic. I don't know. But what I enjoyed about the latest tracks is how much more out there they were, and I will go and listen to some more
And
of that.
you got to kind of give them kudos to quit when they did. I mean,
Yeah.
they could easily be in a band who toured every 3 years, done the greatest hits. They thank for the money, see you later, and they haven't. They quit 10 years ago, and they've done nothing.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Überschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
It's Babs here again. Thanks for listening to the first half. I'm really happy you've made it this far, especially if you agree with me that R.E.M are overrated, even if Michael Stipe seems like a really ace guy. I'm really excited and hopeful for the next part. I'm hoping that I can change some people's minds on the B-52's. If I can convince one uptight fuddy-duddy that they're geniuses, I'll be chuffed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2, especially if your name is Modine.
Underrated.
That segues nicely into B-52's.
Yeah.
Because B-52's have been going since 1976. So last year I saw them live in Brussels, where I live, doing their farewell European tour, and they were incredible. I haven't gone to look at how old they are, but if they've been going since 1976, you can imagine. And they still had energy, and they still got the crowd going, and they were an excellent live band. And yeah, I think the reason why I wanted to pick them is because a lot of people who I've talked to, they know Love Shack, they know Rock Lobster, and despite them being, I think, excellent songs on their own, because it's a band with a sense of humor, people don't take them seriously enough, in my opinion. And I think they've done so many interesting things, so many kind of not exactly different genres, but tackling songs in lots of different ways. The playlist that I gave you, there's a song about ancient Iran and a dog called Quiche Lorraine and bathroom graffiti. Some are more punky, some are more new wavy, some are more kind of 50s influenced. It's really diverse, and yeah, I really love them and love to champion them. What is your opinion? What was your opinion of the B-52's coming in? What's your relationship with them?
So I think that, for example, in my head, in my young brain, Love Shack and Shiny Happy People were out on the radio in the same time. In my head, I think looking back, they were a couple of years apart. I think Love Shack's maybe 89 and Shiny Happy People's 1991. But they're both two songs that's on MTV at always the same time, because I got MTV in the early 90s, and they were songs that were always on there. So I've always linked the two being quite similar. And then the B-52's, I never really went out of my way to hear them. And the only time I'd hear B-52's song was on American movies, because I think they're a lot bigger in America than in the UK. In the UK, they were basically that one hit. And then in America, you'd hear their songs on films. And I go, that sounds good. And then I'd find out that, that's a B-52 song. And the songs that I remember hearing on a couple of films growing up was R.E.M.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of their classiest songs. And is that on the same album as Love Shack as well, isn't it?
Oh, good question. Good question, Fran.
And am I right in saying that Nile Rodgers might have produced that album?
Nile Rodgers produced 6 out of the 10 songs on Cosmic Thing, which is the album that has R.E.M, that has Love Shack, and Dry County, which I put on the playlist. But actually, I picked, I think, 3 songs from Cosmic Thing: Bushfire, Love Shack, and Dry County. None of them were produced by Nile Rodgers. They were produced by Don Was from the funk band Was Not Was, which I don't know if you know them.
Of course. And in a bizarre way, I was listening to a podcast that mentioned them this morning. We all know the song Walk the Dinosaur.
Yeah.
Which sounds just like a certain Mark Ronson song with Bruno Mars.
Yes. So when I went to look this up, I did know Walk the Dinosaur, but I had heard Out Come the Freaks, which is kind of another one of their songs. And but yeah, I was gonna say, B-52's are often kind of dismissed for being, just an unserious, humorous camp band. But Nile Rodgers worked with them, and David Byrne worked with them. So I don't know if you did any research into the Mesopotamia EP.
No, I know Niall as a Duran fan, guys. Obviously,
of course.
There's a big link to Niall, and so I've always thought about checking out that album. They're always a band. I've read about R.E.M. and their early era in Athens, and how they were very much bands that would be friends and the Athens scene. So I've always known about they've been around since the the new wave era. But yeah, I don't know why I've never jumped into it. I think maybe because of their 50s and 60s nostalgia, it's that has kind of put me off. It's like the kooky.
So you're not a John Waters fan?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they are. Yeah, like the B movie horror kookiness. Fred's voice is,
So this is it. So I was talking, I was telling a friend of mine about this episode record that we were going to do, and there's like a running joke because I keep trying to get him into the B-52's, and he's just like his voice I can't stand. I bloody love it. Sprechgesang, I think it's called, the speak singing that he does.
Yeah.
I think because Cindy and Kate's voices are so melodic and so strong, and they do amazing harmonies. I quite like him as the contrast.
Every band needs to have their own individual voice, and as soon as you hear him sing, it's B-52's, and that for a band is gold dust. You don't want to be a band who could sound like 1,000 singers, but listening to your playlist, he works best when he works in tandem with the other singers. When it's all him, I struggle more, but I don't mind it when he's mixing up with the other singers.
I find him very funny. For me, music with a sense of humor is a plus. I know it puts a lot of people off, and like a lot of people don't even like musical comedy. And this is music that's funny, not musical comedy. But it just makes me laugh. And I've listened to so many of those songs a lot. I like Mesopotamia, for example. What Kate and Cindy are doing, like, it's so difficult what they're doing, that their harmonies are really, and he's just going, there's a lot of ruins in Mesopotamia, and it makes me laugh almost every single time. For me, it's not an issue, but I think actually, kind of in tangent with R.E.M, a lot of people don't like Michael Stipe's voice because they say that it's quite whiny. And yeah, I have to say, I think maybe that's one of I'm not a huge fan of Michael Stipe's voice either, and a voice can definitely put a band off. Another classic example is Placebo. But yeah, but back to Fred. So recently, I think the last CD purchases I did kind of in an actual record shop, one of them was a Fred Schneider solo album, which I haven't listened to yet. I'm kind of saving it for when I'm in the mood, but I will listen and come back to you on that. And I'm sure you'll hate it.
I went a bit rogue earlier, and I listened to some other later B-52 songs, and they've got some decent tracks, and like they always have a really decent guitar sound, and I think that was the founding member guy who passed away in the mid-80s.
Ricky Wilson. So he's the brother of one of the vocalists, Cindy Wilson. He unfortunately died in 1985, I think, of HIV/AIDS. His guitar sound is amazing. And one of the things with B-52's as well is, they're definitely known now as a kind of queer band, I think. So I think Cindy Wilson is the only non-gay. So the drummer said he said about them being kind of a queer band, not until 1992 did someone ask us about being gay. It was almost more subversive that we didn't talk about it. We were just trying to be ourselves. Being gay was just a part of it. That's really how we wanted the world to be, You just do your thing and your sexual orientation is just a part of it. I think it was kind of more revolutionary because of that. People either related to us on that level or they didn't. Some people got it, some people didn't, but we certainly never tried to hide it at all.
I never really. I never knew that more of the bands were gay. I just thought they were part of that. Like I said, for John Waters' kind of throwback kind of kooky scene. And I don't mind John Waters movies, but you have to be in that mood.
And I think, it's camp as well. And of course, campness is associated with gay culture, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, there are camp people who aren't gay and vice versa. And it is, a movement as much as it is kind of like, related to sexuality.
I'm camper than most people out there. Nothing wrong with a bit of camp, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with a bit of camp. But I really think their campness is one of the reasons they're a bit dismissed, And when I was reading a bit more about them, I really enjoyed, there was a Salon.com article which said that they were the most subversive band in the US. They may be the most subversive band in America. And in a way they are. They really, what they said was No novelty. The B-52s may be the most subversive band America ever gave us. Campy, yes. Colourful, yes. Fun, very much so. But none of this should take away from their value as vanguards. And there's this great New York Times article called Before and After the B-52s, where they profile a bunch of B-52 songs and kind of look at who their peers are at the same time, and you really see the influence.
I couldn't straight away think of a band who've been influenced by the B-52s, but who would you say are then?
I would say it's stuff like even rockabilly, as a genre, and stuff like that. And I would even say kind of, I'm looking at it now. They've put kind of Nirvana and Sugar Cubes on a par with Planet Claire by the B-52s, which is not where I would go immediately, sort of thing.
I mean, I can see this. I can see maybe the Scissor Sisters.
Scissor Sisters, yeah.
having the male, female vocals and the kookiness and and the throwbacks. Yeah, I can see them being influenced by the B-52s, especially visually.
I don't think they influence people necessarily only music-wise, but I think attitude-wise. I think like they said, they were just being themselves, and it really kind of allowed people to be themselves and be a bit ridiculous. I would think that they influenced a lot of kind of actually 80s bands, and it was pre-New Romantics, right? Which it wasn't the same level of campy, but it was definitely kind of more feminine and kind of wearing makeup and stuff like that. They may not have done that, but they were definitely doing that beforehand. And I mean, it really surprised me when I looked it up that Rock Lobster is from 1979. I would have thought it was an 80s song, and I think that's so ahead of its time. And from their debut album, the B-52s. Yeah, and Planet Claire as well from the same album.
It's surprising that they got signed, really, because that sound in Georgia was much so out of touch with everyone. I remember reading that they had such a big fan base that they kind of were this amount of people going to the gigs. Then there must be something. Let's put an album out. But there's always been America has always had that weirdo. Devo are similar to B-52s in aesthetics, and it's like that nerd rock that there's a lot of bands in America who are fight against the sort of the Motley Crues by going the complete opposite way. And I think in the late 70s there was quite a lot of bands, even for cars, who were kind of embracing being geeks and embracing that their weirdness. So there was a scene already sort of starting.
Diva were also from the middle of nowhere, right? Athens, Georgia is not exactly it's not Atlanta. It's a small town. And I think you've lived in the US, Fran. I've only visited, but what I love about the US is the kind of subculture town, the college towns where they're small, but there's definitely an alternative atmosphere. And I would love to visit Athens, Georgia, because I'm like, there must be something,
Well, yeah, but I guess they have more freedom because they're not New York and they're not LA, so they can just do what they want to do, which is kind of I guess why grunge came out of Seattle, and because they have to create their own scene because no one's going to visit. They have to create their own culture and create these interesting scenes. So yeah, I guess in some ways it's a blessing, but then I guess looking around now with the whole internet. Is it going to be harder for different areas to have a scene?
So I was reading. There was an interview. I don't know if you saw it So Donald Glover interviewed Michaela Cole, and they were talking about TV, but he was also talking about music, and he was saying that he's like, scenes now last no time because now you can just send stuff over the internet, whereas before, you'd have to have a friend, you'd have to go and visit a friend in a town who would take you to a band, and then very slowly. Have you seen Searching for Sugar Man? The film, for example, where it's one woman took an album to South Africa and that's how he became massive. Whereas now everything's there. And I mean, I think even my own relationship to music is changing a little bit because everything is so accessible now. Something comes out, you listen to it straight away. There's not as much anticipation and the waiting and the fact that you can only buy one album or two at a time and that's what you're stuck with. I mean, I think you were saying in a previous conversation, right, that one album a month is good enough for you. I kind of get that feeling, and that's why I still enjoy buying CD. I bought this Fred Schneider CD on a whim because I'm like, well, I'd love to support him and the B-52s. B-52s albums. I only have the Greatest Hits, which is how I got into them. The Time Capsule album. It's a live album album in Athens, Georgia, where they're from. It's called With the Wild Crowd Live in Athens, GA from 2011, which is really great. I haven't bought any B-52's albums besides that.
Have all of the singers done solo albums then?
I think, yeah, definitely Kate Pearson has done it. Cindy Wilson, has she? That's a great question.
Over underrated. Sous-évalué. Överschätzt. Överunderskattad. Over underrated.
Because I noticed that they did slow down massively, didn't they? After the 90s, like they barely released many albums at all, really.
They didn't, but they did release Funplex. I didn't include any songs from Funplex on the song, but it's not a bad album. I think the songs that I included in the list for you, they're mostly from either the Time Capsule album, Cosmic Thing, or the B-52's, the debut album. Good stuff is from Good Stuff.
Good Stuff.
But Good Stuff was on the Greatest Hits as well. That's how I discovered it.
Good Stuff. The album, listening back, is I like about 3 or 4 songs already. And you know, on about having a sense of humor. I think in one of those songs, doesn't like Kate say, "Hey, I'm a Scorpio and from 1981," and like so, no, I love having personality in songs, and you know, they got tons of personality, and I think my best way of getting into this band is by probably watching a video documentary and to see their visuals. I think they're a band that you need to have the visuals with them for it to work, and I think.
That's interesting. That's not how I got into them at all. I think it was my mum bought the Greatest Hits. We played it a lot. But I think I got into them because I was quite young. I think I would have been, when did the album come out? I feel like I wouldn't have even been a teenager when it came out. Let me check. So yeah, exactly. So that Greatest Hits was released in 1998. I would have been 11. And I feel like my mum would have bought it maybe in like 2000, 2001. So I was still young and, you know, on the edge of becoming an insufferable indie kid, but not quite yet. So I was just like, oh, this is like a really fun band. And I just didn't take them very seriously. And that is actually how I got into them. Whereas, yeah, here I am now being like, no, but you should take them seriously. They are vanguards, blah, blah, blah. You know, they have a song called Quiche Lorraine about a dog called Quiche Lorraine. You know, who else is doing that?
And I mean, I enjoyed the song "My Own Private Idaho," and I've always known the film. I had no idea it was a B-52 song.
And did you know that? Yeah, the song doesn't appear in the film. He just took the inspiration from the title, and asked if he could use it. And I read that they actually had never played a concert in Idaho until 2011. So there we go. I think it was just a phrase that they came up with.
Maybe the boy thought, what's the most boring town we could think of when I went to Idaho?
But I think this was like in an interview with a local newspaper, and they were like, no, like we kind of just picked Idaho out, randomly. No, we're not insulting people from Idaho. I guess it's like, you know, Borat in Kazakhstan. You know, he had to pick somewhere.
Planet Clear, I can see being an influential song. I can't say I loved it. Looking at it, I think I will be more into the latter. When I say later, I mean like late 80s, early 90s.
So Cosmic Thing.
I really like the songs I've heard from Good Stuff and Cosmic Thing. That's my pop credentials. I like the mix of the keyboard sound and the guitar in the early 80s. But I think like some of the choruses are kind of like not really doing it for me. They're a bit all over the place. So yeah, so I think I may start from the latter and make my way back.
Hooray! I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I'm actually almost the opposite. Well, not the opposite, because I have this Greatest Hits that's from all over. I really pick and choose. I think if I had to pick a favorite album, it would be Cosmic Thing. Not for Love Shack, actually, for Bushfire and for Dry County. I love it. So because Dry County is, I don't know, it's much more country-esque, definitely like a driving song. You feel like driving down a dusty road, as they sing in Love Shack. And Bushfire is great, even though I naively thought, I was like, oh yeah, it must be about bushfires, you know, it's a hot part of the world. But then I went on songmeanings.com and then they were talking about oral sex, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess it could be. didn't realize that.
But I mean, they look like a band who just like have a lot of fun, you know. Like they seem so enthusiastic, and like you can hear their love for the music and themselves in the lyrics and everything about it. So Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the song. Is that you, Modine? I have no idea what it's
It's
about.
me, Modine.
But the end part of that is the end chorus was amazing, and I
Yeah.
listened to it 3 times in a row. So I mean, if there's more like
That's,
that,
do you know, I almost put that song on the
did you?
playlist and didn't. That's also on Time Capsule, and it's a very catchy one. But
Is
in
that
the end,
single?
I think it was a single, but don't quote me on that until you check it out. But I actually substituted it for 6060842 because I wanted to put that one in because a little bit like Radio Free Europe of R.E.M, I don't think you would have necessarily thought that was very B-52's because it's a bit more, it's a bit wonky, but it's a bit more punky, you know, it's a bit more rocky. So I put that in instead of Is That You, Modine, because I guess, you know, there was Planet Claire, there was Good Stuff, which was on a kind of similar vibe.
But I guess the passing away of the original member, maybe we'll see the principal songwriter as well.
I think so. Yeah.
That's probably why maybe they did their later 80s stuff is quite different to the early 80s stuff.
But I mean, it just happens, doesn't it? Like your sound evolves. And I mean, really what's impressive with B-52's is not only have they been going since 1976, it's still the original lineup, you know, minus Ricky Wilson, who passed away, but it's still, yeah, Kate, Cindy, Fred and Keith. Probably won't ever get to see them live because, you know, they did that final European tour.
A lot of bands have done a final tour. I think Bowling with Soup have done one every 3 years for the past 10 years. I think.
That's from B-52's to Bowling for Soup. Yeah, very different bands, different vibes. Yeah, they probably will do more concerts in the US, but they called it Whammy Farewell European Tour. So I'm thinking, you know,
right.
they probably won't tour in Europe anymore. But maybe if you hop on a plane to Athens,
I wonder what size venues they do in Europe. When you saw them, was it how many people?
So yeah, I saw them at Ancienne Belgique, which is, I would say, a mid-sized venue in Brussels. How many people would we have been? I would guess around 500.
Okay, so not.
It wasn't Forêt Nationale or Palais d'Uz, which are the kind of the really big, you know, more or the stadium, which are the bigger ones.
So they're not making millions and millions by doing a tour then, basically.
That is a good question. For me, it always goes back to, with B-52's, most people only know Love Shack, At a Push, Rock Lobster, right? So if that's all you know of a band, you know, you have to really like those songs, or, you know, be a bit more of a music nerd, or be more into kind of, yeah, that kind of humor and pop to get into them. The crowd was quite mixed, actually. So it wasn't all older people. Like I when I went to see New Order at the same venue, I was really one of the youngest, which actually surprised me a bit given how big a band they are. But yeah, it was a real mix, even though it was actually the older people were going for it way more than the younger people, which was quite funny to see. So I guess they would play more mid-sized venues. But on Spotify, actually, because you were saying that you think they're bigger in the US, the cities where they're the most popular is actually Sydney, then Brisbane, then London, Mexico City, Melbourne. So Australia.
They've got a big gay following out there. Randomly, I just looked at the ages. I think there's a 9-year age difference between Cindy and Kate.
I did not know that.
1948. She's in her 70s.
Wow.
And Cindy's 1957. Fred's 51. The drummer's 53. So Kate
honestly,
Kate's like in her 70s now.
Then I'm even more impressed because they, you know, they're obviously older, but they were all dressed up and they were all kind of moving and dancing and shaking. It was really, because I was like, you know, they're definitely like an older band. How's it going to be? And you know, they have such energetic music. But yeah, if they play again, you know, I would really recommend it. And actually, even if not, I would. Did you listen to any of? Because quite a few of their live albums are on.
I've not heard them live. No, I listened to your playlist a minute, and then I went rogue and listened to another playlist as well.
Good. I'm like that you went rogue. You know, I you know, I haven't yet gone rogue with the music that you've listened to, but I have hope that you're going to convince me that an overrated or underrated band is really worth listening to one day, Fran.
Well, I guess the idea of underrated is to make someone want to listen to more.
Exactly.
With an overrated, you probably have an opinion already. It's hard to change.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's okay for us to do an overrated, even if we both like the band, but maybe discuss, you know, why they've become so popular as opposed to not. And I think with R.E.M, they really evolved with the times, right? Like they were post-punk when it was post-punk, then they went kind of more commercial. And yeah, despite B-52's also kind of doing lots of very interesting things. And like I said, Funplex, it's not their best album, but it is an interesting album. They do go and listen to it. They definitely went with the times, and yeah, to me they're timeless. I think even if you don't like the music, if you have a sense of humor, they're good fun.
I think I will definitely be checking out more B-52's. I will have a YouTube rabbit hole later on and see what happens. No.
I actually haven't seen a lot of B-52's videos either. I think the only one I've seen is Love Shack. Well, the only one I'd seen was Love Shack, and then I started realizing that RuPaul is in a lot of their videos, and they're quite fun. And yeah, you were saying that you got into them because of the visuals. I mean, I guess I didn't, but maybe it will be enhanced by checking out the videos with the songs.
Yeah, because Devo, they're definitely a band you need to watch the videos with, because they made that in videos. That was part of the whole aesthetic. Was they did everything. Like it was Devo was everything. They were one of the most DIY bands of that era. You know. Maybe we could talk about Devo, because I think Devo are an underrated band, my friend.
And I don't know very much Devo. I bought, well, my mum had Are We Not Men, Answer We Are Devo. I didn't really get into it. Like, it's one of those where she would play it and I would, be like, oh, okay, but it never clicked completely with it. And I know they're from Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, and I where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is, right? I think so. I think so. You should, for a quiz question, I think that's one to check out. I think they're one of those bands where it's like I would definitely enjoy hearing about them as a band as much as discovering their music. So maybe we should do a future episode.
Devo from 1976 to 1983 were really interesting, and then they were only good for they were really good for 6 years, and then they kind of became a bit like into. I think they got caught up with like the keyboards happening in the 80s, and they always wanted to buy the newest technology. And by buying all the technology and trying to be all like, wow, look at this, look what we can do, they then completely lost their sort of punk interestingness. So by 1983, they became a bit stale because they weren't putting guitars into their music. They were just using too many drum machines and using too many effects. And yes, you've got a sampler, but you don't have to use every single button on it just because you can. And like, in the videos, like, oh, look, we've got green screen. Look what we can do, guys. It's like, yeah, we don't have to use green screen. And I think
that's a lot of bands that's happened to. Like Radiohead, New Order. They, a guitar band that then embraced the electronics and gained some fans and lost some fans along the way as well.
You can ride, like New Order, for example. They never went full electro. Like they always have guitars and bass on their record.
The bass, the bass especially.
In some way, like they never went like Depeche Mode. Like New Order would always have a guitar on it. But by like 1984, you literally did not hear any organic instruments from Devo at all, and it kind of made their music a bit plastic, unfortunately.
So I'm delighted that the playlist inspired you to go and explore more B-52's, and I need to go away and listen to some late R.E.M. to see if that will really shift my mind.
Yes, I think for you, the last two and the first two R.E.M.
Okay.
will inspire you, and just the
bookends of R.E.M. is what I need to
go to
listen
bookends,
to.
and then maybe one day you can force yourself to listen to Automatic for the People, because it's one of the best albums ever written.
Yeah, you've told me before. I want to believe, Fran. I want to believe, but at the moment I'm on the fence. So let's see.
It's fine. Well, so you're still saying that Overrated, and that's fine. No, maybe next time maybe I can change your mind. And and I will definitely say that the B-52's should not be underrated.
That's all I wanted from this.
Over underrated. Sopra sottovalutato. Sous-évalué. Over underrated. Sous-évalué.
You made it to the end of episode 2. We're super grateful you got this far. It's been quite a teething process, these first few episodes, as we're total podcast recording newbies getting the hang of things. But believe me when I say we get better. We have nice new mics, better techniques. Stick with us. And we really want to hear from you. So if you want to email us, you can get in touch on overunderratedmusicpod@gmail.com, or one word. It's Over Underrated Music Pod on Instagram, but the character limit means that it's only OU Music Pod on Twitter. All the stuff we talked about in this episode, articles, videos, etc., will be in the show notes. So thanks again for listening, and see you next time.